Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments on whatever platform you're watching on, assuming you're watching live, and they should show up here in my chat room. And we can talk directly that way. I should probably warn you that we have been having some internet problems today. In case any further problems should occur, but I don't really think we're going to have any more. And I'm also using um, a new earpiece, but I don't see that that should make any difference to anything either. Um, so we shall go forward. And today is Thursday, and I woke up this morning, as I often do, wondering what I would talk about today. And I thought it might be instructional um, to explain how I decided on a subject. And I spoke to Spirit and I said, give me a subject. And I went to look at Facebook, as I often do, and I came up with a subject. And as you will have seen, and hello to Janet Winston in the chat room, it's good to see you. My subject today is about examples, how to choose good examples. And what I saw was a meme. And this may not be the most popular opinion on my part, but it was Nikola Tesla's secret to manifesting anything you want. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. And this really got me thinking, and I thought, this is something to talk about. So let me tell you a story from my life that does not directly relate to Nikola Tesla, but relates to this story, to this issue. And hello to Janet Gann in the chat room. Many years ago, when I was still very, very young, a friend of our family shared with me their tips for money magic, and I thought this was quite exciting. I was very interested to learn this, and I went home and I told my mother. And my mother loved this person. They were very close, and her reaction, I'm sure, was not meant to be negative toward that person, but her reaction was, I've never known that person to have any money. I don't think they're the person you should be looking to for money magic tips. And this was a very important lesson because she was absolutely right. Not saying that money magic didn't work, but it didn't work extremely well because these were not people who had money. My mother, on the other hand, was. And her idea of money magic tips was obviously more valuable to follow. Coming back to Nikola Tesla and his recipe for manifesting anything you want, firstly, I question whether it's real. But if it is, what was the fate of Nikola Tesla? He died in poverty and relative obscurity. This is not an indication of someone who could manifest anything that he wanted. We constantly hear about the idea that Edison took advantage of Tesla and was far more successful in every stretch of the imagination. Well, if you were looking for examples of how to manifest, you should be looking at Edison. That doesn't mean Nikola Tesla didn't do some good things. It doesn't mean he didn't have some great ideas. But when it comes to manifesting success from them, he was not successful. So if you want to look to him for inspiration for inventions, absolutely. But would you look to him for material success, for manifestation of things on the material plane? I think it'd be rather foolish to do so. But this comes back to a subject that we've talked about numerous times in recent programs, and that is being willing. And I am not doing readings today, so I'm sorry, there are no reading questions. I only do that very rarely. But if you want a reading question, you can join Tarot Thursday this evening at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, and they'll be doing readings then. I am not, however, doing readings today. Nor do I know for sure when I might consider doing them again. For many years, I only read occasionally at charitable events. Now I am again reading professionally, but only occasionally. Mini questions online. But if you'd like to book a reading, you can do so through CorellianPublishing.com. You can book a reading with me. You can book a reading with Reverend Mary Hawk or Reverend Brian Ellicott, and they're all very capable of answering your questions. And hello to Daniel in the chat room. And now I do, as I say, still read, and I have regular clients, um, but that is on a professional basis. But getting back to what I was saying, this comes back, and part of what I was just saying comes back to reassessing the things we have made our minds up about. We always have to be willing to do that. A lot of people have decided that Nikola Tesla is one of their great heroes, and that's perfectly fine on those areas where he did great things. But to take from that the idea that he could manifest anything he wanted when he ended in such abysmal failure is a big jump. For me, for many years, I never thought I'd go back to reading. I eventually reconsidered that thought, and now I do. So these are things that illustrate why we need to be willing to reassess our assumptions, but also why we need to seek good examples. Most of the time, what I talk about on this program recently is leadership. And when you're seeking to take a leadership role, whether we're talking about leadership of your own life, because, not everybody is leading their own life. Some are quietly being led, or leading an organization or a movement. Along the way, you're going to look for role models. And in doing that, you should look for role models who were successful. I've talked a few times about who my role models were. And in terms of people that I knew, Olivia Robertson was a major role model. Pete Pathfinder Davis was a major role model. And Selena Fox was a major role model. All very successful people. Now, would I describe myself as having successfully applied all the things that I sought to learn from them? I don't know that I can make that decision. I think when it comes to assessing ourselves, other people have to do that. Overall, I feel that I've been quite successful in my leadership role. And this does kind of take us back to Nikola Tesla. So when I talk about him dying in poverty and obscurity, it may be that wealth was not one of his goals. That being well known was not one of his goals. But I don't know that I believe that to be the case. And at any rate, what I'm talking about is not whether he achieved his goals, but whether his recipes for manifestation are ones you want to follow. And I would say that if you choose to do so, make sure you're very clear how you're applying it. When it comes to assessing ourselves, I don't know that we can ever really do that. Sometimes I think that when it comes to assessing our works, we can do that successfully. Did we do what we set out to do? And I would say that by and large, I did. Did we do it as well as we could have? Well, I'm a great believer in that idea that you do the best you can. And had you known how to do better, you would have. So I would say that everyone does the best they could. Could better have been done? Well, I think that's always true. And hello to Steve Taylor in the chat room. But I think that in the end, how other people see you is sometimes a better idea of how you've done, but not always, because sometimes people see you realistically, sometimes they see you through their prejudices. I am certainly aware of how many people see me, and whether the ones who love me see me through their prejudices, whether the ones who are not fond of the things I've done, see me through their prejudices, I have no way to know. And in the end, I believe in what I believe was Eleanor Roosevelt, who said that whether you do it or whether you don't, nobody is going to be satisfied with you. So you should do the thing you think is right. Now, Daniel says that maybe following Tesla's way to achieve inspired ideas is the best. And yes, I would agree that if you're looking for inspired ideas, if you're looking to create new inventions, new ways of doing things, following his example for that is good. That is not what I understood the meme to be talking about. And sometimes too, if you're looking at a person, you have to consider what they set out to do and what they were and were not good at. And speaking of myself, if you were looking for a monetary example, I would be the worst person to follow. But that's partly because wealth was never one of my particular goals. I wanted to build my tradition. I wanted to teach. I wanted to pursue spiritual things. Making money was never one of my personal goals, except as it helped me to do that. Was that a good idea on my part? Not necessarily, but it is how I live my life. And I'm trying to reconsider that assumption as I go forward. And you'll see me doing far more work with ways of raising money than previously. But on the other hand, I always knew the importance of money. I just wasn't particularly worried about having a lot of it myself. So I've always been involved in various commercial things because nothing gets done without financial backing. And when you look in our pagan community at all the different events, none of them is happening, or at least no major event is happening without financial backing. Sometimes it's backing they get from the community. Sometimes it's one person who's just paying for it. But none of it is free. And above all things, I despise those people who think that everything should be free, because nothing is free. Nothing gets done without someone paying for it, either with cash, almost always with some cash, with time, and with work. These things don't just happen. And I think those people who want everything to be free are frankly just greedy and not particularly an ornament to our community and not helping it to move forward. And I am not in sympathy with that point of view. I think that we need, when looking at our community in particular, to think in terms of how we can support it if we want it to do anything. And I feel that I have spent many years supporting my community, and particularly my tradition, and done a great deal of both spending and work for those goals. And I never expected it to happen for free because I knew perfectly well it didn't. And I think those people who think otherwise just have no conception of how things work. And this again comes back to the need to reassess ideas. And Daniel says there's a joke that pagans might share their partner before paying $15 for a workshop they wish to attend. I've never heard that joke, but I think that's probably true for some people. One of the stories I do tell comes from a famous author. And I heard her tell this story herself, and she was talking about being at a pagan festival. And there were many, I think it was the Pagan Spirit Festival, I won't swear to it, Pagan Spirit Gathering. And there was a particular vendor who had an athame that was very beautiful. It was set with various stones. It was very elegant, and it was $300. The author could not afford to buy this athame, but though they really would have liked to have done so. But, they knew they could not afford it, and so they admired it and moved on. During this event, they were doing workshops, and a person came up to them and said, I'm your greatest fan. I love all your works. Um, and I can't wait to one day be able to buy your new book, but I have no money. I'm on a fixed income," and a whole long sob story. And in the end, the author felt sorry for this person who was such a great fan and gave them the book for free. 3 days later, they saw this same person buy the $300 athame that the author herself could not afford. This speaks to the priorities that people set for themselves. And the author said from that day forward, she resolved she'd never give another person a free book because, of course, they weren't free to her. And if you don't know, when authors have books at these events, they didn't get them for free, except very occasionally. They might get a few free books when they first published the book, but after that, they're paying for them. They're paying a slightly reduced rate so that they can sell them at cover price and have a profit, but it's not free. So the free book to the fan was not free to the author. It was basically, in essence, a cash gift to this person who turned out to have plenty of cash. Um, I am put in mind of another similar story about a temple that I used to go to, and there was a person in that temple who would often attend the coffee chats that were held. But they could never afford the coffee. They were too poor to buy coffee. So they would just sit there and talk. And another lady who was attending, who is in the chat room at this moment, decided that, it's just a cup of coffee. I'll buy the coffee for this guy because he's too poor to do it for himself. And I feel sorry for him. And so for several weeks, possibly several months, she started buying his coffee for him. And I want to say hello to Nikki Dodd in the chat room. It's good to see you, Nikki. And this went on, as I say, for probably several months, as I recall. And then one coffee social, he came back from the science fiction convention he had just attended, which had a ticket price of several $100s, and talked about all the great things he'd bought while he was there, making very clear that he had never not had enough money to buy coffee. It just was not something he cared to put his money into. And the lady who'd been buying the coffee observed this, and she ceased buying coffee for him. But a lot of pagans do not necessarily put their priorities in an order that helps their community. Then they wonder why there's not more in the community. The simple truth is, if you want a strong community, you must support it. And it's not all a matter of buying all the shiny things for yourself, because those things won't continue to be there if the community is not supported. The science fiction convention, where the coffee guys spent so much money, they were in no danger of not having another one because everybody was spending their money there. The coffee social eventually stopped because it wasn't getting enough support. And hello to Ed Carr in the chat room. It's good to see you, Ed. And basically, not only do you need to choose practical examples, you need to try to be one. If you want to see these things happen, you want to see them continue, you have to support them. You have to keep them going. And, sometimes that may mean you can't buy the $300 athame. Or you have to prioritize your funds differently. But, if you want these events to continue, they need support. A lot of times it may look like people are doing things free of charge. They're just putting it out there. They don't need any support, but that's very rarely ever true. Even the show that you're watching, there's a cost to put this show on the air. And currently, that's mostly privately handled, though we have a sponsor whose commercial I'll be playing in a moment, which has relieved that burden a little bit for the current month. But, it's not being done for free. This technology is not free. And people often forget that. For many years, I was closely associated with witchschool.com, still am in many ways. That certainly did not put itself up free of charge. every month was hundreds and thousands of dollars in programming fees, um, in the cost of the websites themselves, in the cost of the names for the URLs, in the cost of just keeping everything going. None of it was happening for free, even though the vast majority of people associated with it were working as volunteers. And the few people who were getting any kind of recompense were getting very, very little, certainly nothing that would have been considered reasonable in the open market. And for everything that I did with the school, I worked as a volunteer. I did receive a small stipend from the church, but not from the school. And that small stipend was certainly not enough to do more than maybe pay a single bill. People often think that the organizations they're dealing with don't need their support, and they're very wrong about it. And then when the organization is no longer there, they wonder why. I remember a question that Ed the Pagan asked on his chat room not too awfully long ago about covens or groups that were organized on democratic principles. And there were a lot of answers that talked about, well, yes, this group was being the operative term. As I recall, there were very few, if any, answers that involved the word is. But that's because so often the groups in our community don't actually get support, or not enough support to keep going, and therefore they don't keep going. Now, sometimes this is also true to the fact that we have things like witch wars that happen in our community. Granted, those were far more common 20 years ago, and they were absolutely ruinous to the community. But you still see them now occasionally. You see people trying to start them. Luckily, they no longer meet the same success they once did, but you still see people trying to do it all the time. And I think my message on that subject is, if you want a strong community, you have to give it what support you can. Because in many cases, they can't just keep going indefinitely on the hope that one day they'll get support. But speaking of support, we're slightly past halfway through the show, and it's time for me to play the message from our sponsor. And the message from our sponsor comes now. And speaking of sponsors, let's go to our other sponsor.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
And thank you to Equinox Learning Hub and Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions for being our sponsors. And we should be announcing our next auction soon. And what I'm doing right now is I'm looking for interesting objects and also creating some. And I plan to offer more artwork. And I'm also thinking of offering spell candles, which are specifically created for certain spells and blessed and offered for sale. And I'm curious to know if people would be interested in that option. I've seen a number of metaphysical people doing it, and I thought I would give it a shot. So watch for that coming from Reverend Don's magical and metaphysical and magic auctions, because it will be coming soon. These are some of the things that are going on in my world. Um, and I'm also curious for what other kinds of things you might like to see in the auction. Presently, we've been doing books and various small artifacts like pendulums, jewelry, etc. I do have a little bit of my family jewelry left that I may put up for sale. As you know, last year I sold a great deal of my family's jewelry. My mother left a vast amount of jewelry. And I sold jewelry that came from her and other members of the family, mostly to Corellians who wanted something from the ancestors. There are still a few pieces left. I did not at any point offer the better pieces for sale. Things like, oh, things like my grandmother's opera pearls are sitting in storage somewhere. My mother's childhood pearls, if you're not familiar with that, there used to be a custom for little girls to receive pearl necklaces, which they would be adding to each year during their childhood. So I have that. There are a few interesting rings that are part of what I plan to keep and pass on. But there are many wonderful things yet that I have that I may once again offer for sale. And Janet says, yes, please. So, yeah, we'll be bringing a number of things to you here in the near future. I'm also looking at possibly doing some more sculpture, certainly some more drawings, and these various things should be coming across the auction site. And, you know, this too speaks to part of our subject for today, the idea of having to reassess your decisions, because I had always planned, speaking of the family jewelry, to carry that through my entire life and then pass it on to the next generation. And in a manner of speaking, I did, because I have proceeded from the assumption that my cardiac event last year constituted a death of part of myself, and that it fulfilled lifetime obligations that I had made. And spirit certainly seemed to bear this out. And a number of things that I once had planned to carry to death, I found out the next generation was not interested in receiving them in that way. And so I've dispersed many of them. Now, there were individuals who were interested in receiving parts of this, and that was made possible through the sale and a few gifts. But for me, this was an amazing transformation. And you just have to look at me to notice that part of it is that I lost a great deal of weight, and I lost it immensely quickly. And I've always felt that this had to do with letting down some of those burdens I had carried and reassessing my role going into the future. And I no longer see myself as carrying all that burden of the past. That is now passed on to other people. I still share it with them to some extent, but it's no longer my role. And I've reassessed how I go forward with my life. And part of that is Gaia Thrift. And you'll be hearing incessantly about Gaia Thrift as we go forward, and also returning to reading. And if anyone is interested in getting a reading from me, you can book one at CorellianPublishing.com, or you can message me directly. And I'm thinking of once again offering a special on readings in the next few days, so keep an eye open for that. And if you're here in Vermilion County, you can actually come and have a reading in person. Otherwise, it would be online or by phone. And I have numerous clients that I do that for now. And, I find that reading either by phone or online works just as well as reading in person. And I think this is a very important point of instruction in psychic practices. You can read for a person anywhere on earth. All you need is something to hold on to connect to them. And that would be a whole program unto itself. But I knew people years ago who believed you couldn't do a good reading by phone. You couldn't do a good distance reading. You certainly couldn't do it online. They were absolutely wrong. They needed to reassess their mindset. Although they may have been right for them, but very wrong in my experience. And so, again, and Steve says a lot of us need to do these things, reassess our ideas. And so, as I end today's program, I once again want to recommend finding practical examples of the things you want to do and making sure that the examples you're following lead to the places you actually want to go. And in the second place, reassess your assumptions periodically, because it's not uncommon that they may, one, be flawed, or B, be outgrown. And so we constantly need to be reassessing our mindset. With that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour, so we will end with our prayer, as we always do. And I want to thank you all for joining me, and I will be back tomorrow. Now for our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for the many examples that you put in our lives. We thank you for the good examples that you put in our lives that show us how to successfully do the things we want to do. And we thank you for the bad examples that you put in our lives that show us who we don't want to be. And we ask you to help us to keep our minds flexible and open so that we can constantly reassess our attitudes and our desires to keep them current and to help us to get to those places we want to be at. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and thanks, and knowing you are always with us, from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And may you be blessed now and always.